There's something very interesting happening right now to both XRP and Ripple. And I'm quite sure that some of you guys have already heard about this situation because I mentioned it briefly in a previous video. But I'm also quite sure that a ton of people haven't, that might actually be involved in this, might actually be in a massive loss because of this. And so I thought I should bring it to every single one of you in even more detail and what it would mean for both our coins and, well, your Ripple stock, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I actually have two important things to discuss. One is the XRP price based on expectation. It's not a prediction of price really, even though that will be a recurring subject here. It's mostly about what people say about this price, but that is as a response to the company that we're going to be talking about today and the Ripple stock problem we've got. You know, it's all connected. So just make sure you watch the video through. You'll understand why I brought this up. Make sure you press that like button if you haven't done it yet. I appreciate every single one of you. Now, let's first take a step back and discuss briefly where the problems all began. A few years ago, a company popped up by the name of Linkto. It's basically a company that specializes in what is called SPVs, where you, as an individual, can basically invest into private companies through this structure because, well, Linkto basically buys an allocation into a company. Let's say they invest $100 million and they try to reinvest or resell that stock to people that did not have the opportunity to get themselves the stock, you know, because most people don't. If you right now want to invest into Ripple, but it's a private company, through which venture capital fund, through which angle are you going to get in, right? You have to find the right people. Now, because it's kind of annoying for companies that want to remain private to get their stock to 1,000 to 100,000 different people, what some of the middleman companies do is either they have funds where people can invest, but you need to be, you know, there's some rules for that. You need to find blah, blah, blah. There's also another option, which is they make what I previously mentioned, these SPVs, structures where many people can come in, sign an agreement basically, and become a co-owner of this structure, which then invests into the allocation. So if this was too difficult for you, it's just me, John, and Peter. We all put $1,000 in. This middleman structure now has $3,000 that was necessary to invest into Ripple for whatever Ripple gave them. And so that's how it goes through, right? So it's like a, you know, this is what it looks like. It's the best way I can describe it. With us three over on the thumb right here, the middle structure being my head, $3,000, and Ripple on this side. It's just a middleman structure. Why is it that way? Because Ripple doesn't want to manage all these small freaking fries, and also because this way, through this structure, it's easier to basically manage everything, manage all the people, because they all have, for example, a percentage share in that owner or in that entity which invests. It doesn't matter. All that's important there is that that's the way that Linkto basically operated. Now, there are a few beautiful things about it. Let's just quickly see that first. One is that this basically allowed a lot of people that normally would not have any way to get themselves Ripple stock to get some. Because again, Linkto is basically the middleman right there. They are allowed to charge a little markup on that. For example, get themselves perhaps like a 10% fee, let's just call it, a 10% markup on the stock, because those are the rules in the US. They can charge that to make some money on it. Also, again, a reason sometimes companies do this is because let's just say we have a massive valuation. You know, we take something really, really huge. They might not want to raise from companies $1 million each. They might only want to raise $100 million per company. Sometimes an entity might want to invest. Let's say, for example, we take the Twitter deal. It's $44 billion though. Maybe you don't want to spend $44 billion at once. So again, you make an entity that takes money from all these different people. So again, you want to take it over, you want to buy it. They don't want 1,000 buyers, they want one. If that one, however, is split up into 1,000 pieces, they don't care about, right? So that's also how you could, for example, just fill a ticket is what it's called, right? For example, you need to come up with 44 billion. You need to do it alone, but theoretically speaking, your company is also alone and it could have 1,000 different partners in there. But that's also how Linkto could have had an edge for otherwise not being able to do it. So that is great and all. They didn't do it for only Ripple. They did it for many other companies. And if you head over to the website right now, they've got a ton of different things, right? You could just see, for example, we press all companies here. You can quickly see they've got a ton of different things. This is just the A, right? Here comes the B. They've got BitPay, a lot of these properly known crypto companies. They had Circle over in here. They had Ledger over in here. They have themselves Patreon, apparently, Polysign. They have a lot of very, very well-known names. So Whoop they had in here. And also when you clicked on it, you had some different sorts of data. Like, for example, what was the last round and what was the valuation at that point? And what was the share price, or right now, or perhaps at that point, right? Because it's all relative. Here you can see basically a little valuation report, which is not showcased because I'm not logged in right now, but I think it's more important to understand that they had Ripple on there, and that's right now where some conversations, there's actually two that are quite interesting. It's partially Ripple, and it's partially one of the names I mentioned just now. That's where things get kind of interesting, both for XRP holders and for, I guess, Ripple stockholders that bought through this platform. Now, why might that be? Because what I've just talked about right now is why it's a pretty cool thing, right? Cool platform, mostly nice for people that could never find a way to invest. And I really, for every single day I saw this platform, thought the same. Multiple very famous people in the XRP community, or Ripple community, whatever you want to call it, have actually had a partnership with this company, promoted it throughout the last couple of years, and probably made some good money on that, but that's besides the point. They also probably thought that it was a proper company, which again, I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying they probably thought it was a proper company, giving people a way to invest into Ripple stock, and so through those promotions, it became very well known amongst all of us. Here's a bit of where the problems began. Again, I'm just being the messenger here to let everybody in the community know what's going on. I am not stating that this is confirmed true. All I'm trying to do is inform. In no way, shape, or form am I trying to say that these allegations have been proven. I'm a messenger. I'm talking about some tweets I've found. I'm talking about some lawsuits that were filed. If you think that's a bad thing, you must not like freedom at all. Anyway, so one of those parts, I guess, where the whole bad story began, comes from a few months ago. So 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏, who's one of the most well-known XRP community members, who covers the news about XRP, Ripple, and other crypto things really, almost every single day. I don't think she skipped a day in forever, basically. Well, she started mentioning something a little while ago, a few days ago. She basically shared, hey, there's a super ugly update. Quote, with bankruptcy coming in days, double quote, expect customers will be likely transferred into unsecured creditors who will have to wait in line to get paid, end quote. From boiler room sales tactics to selling to customers in some countries, well, things are kind of bad. Quote, again, this is guerrilla warfare. Take no prisoners. Throw everything we have at this one targeted date. Influencers, marketing, ads, social, calls, and smoke signals, end quote. Email from Bill Saris on January 5th, 2023. To recap some of the highlights of the article. Well, Linkto founder Bill Saris was trying to unload shares of Ripple to Linkto's 11,000 users at a price 60% higher than what they paid for it. And if you remember earlier in my video, this is a bit of a problem. Why? Well, there's two fronts to this. It basically depends on what the circumstances are when you're talking about these special purpose vehicles, SPVs, specifically for investments into private companies. Let's say we have the security, right? How much can a company that's buying this sell it for to another person? There's rules for that, but it depends on the situation. They, Linkto here, or specifically this Mr. Bill, allegedly did it in two interesting ways. One, Ripple had a buyback program for stocks. What did Linkto or Bill or whatever, one of these parties, I'm not 100% sure which anymore, what did they do? They basically offered the investors that might have been down on their money or whatever, offered an option to basically sell their stock to whoever at $55, while again, Ripple was basically purchasing at 61. So discrepancy right there. Another is that they basically, as you could just read in the article, marked up the price, you know. They said, you know what, you want to buy Ripple stock, you're going to pay a lot more for it than we did. And apparently the SEC generally prohibits markups above 10%, but Saris went ahead and pushed through anyway, not disclosing the hike to customers and pocketed a few $1 million. This looks to be securities fraud. The SEC and Department of Justice are also investigating whether Saris improperly sold an additional 16,000 shares of Ripple without permission. And you might now think, Dusty, what are you talking about? No permission from Ripple? Well, if you've been paying attention to the markets over the past few days, you'd know that OpenAI had a pretty interesting comment about Solana. Why? Well, Solana had some new features. One of them was, or at least on Solana, there were some new features. One of them was tokenized stocks. And that was because, it's a longer story, but there's basically Robinhood stating that new stocks and real-world assets are going to become more and more important. There was a big news about Robinhood, Solana, everything, just making stocks available on blockchain. But then OpenAI basically said, you know what, Robinhood, you know what, guys, every single transfer of our stock has to go through us, right? These are unapproved transfers. They're not real, so to speak. So if you're buying OpenAI on Solana or whatever, you think you've got an option for that, you didn't, because everything has to go through us, so it can't go this way. So there's a big fuss about that. And to get back to this point right here, Ripple themselves also had some interesting comments about this. So to get back to it, the Wall Street Journal had some comments, right? They made a whole article about this. Investment firm Linkto helped pioneer a private stock trading avenue for a little guy, now is facing federal investigations into its practices and a possible bankruptcy filing. By the way, before we move on, guys, this video I try to make as properly as possible. If you haven't done it yet, make sure you press that like button so hopefully just more people are aware of this. You don't have to, but it might help show this video to more people. That's it. Anyway, Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple, said, understandably, there have been many questions from those who believed they were buying Ripple shares from Linkto. And what happens next, to be clear, on Ripple's end is, what we know from our records is Linkto owns about 4.7 million shares of Ripple, solely purchased on the secondary market from other Ripple shareholders and never directly from Ripple. Apart from Linkto being a shareholder, Ripple has never had a business relationship with Linkto, nor have they participated in our financing rounds. We stopped approving more Linkto purchases on the secondary markets in late 2024 amid growing skepticism. Again, this basically means that Ripple had control over where these secondary investors sold their stock to. And that's where I said before that sometimes you don't want to go and verify and audit 1,000 different individuals who might be buying something. It's sometimes easier to audit one entity or approve or disapprove one entity. But after Brad said this, he said, hey, growing skepticism, we didn't approve more stock purchases. A lot of people went pretty crazy. And he said, okay, it seems the post has raised even more questions. First off, XRP and shares of Ripple are not the same. This post is only about shares in Ripple. Linkto is a very separate company that bought shares in Ripple from some of the existing shareholders. It should be reassuring that we, Ripple, are able to confirm that Linkto owns 4.7 million shares of Ripple. I have no idea how Linkto managed the participants to whom they sold these representative units of Ripple shares, and thus I can't provide any reassurance about how Linkto's business practices or how they will handle it. The good news is that the value of Ripple shares has increased significantly over time, and there should be considerable gains on those shares for Linkto unit holders. So on that end, if you ever did buy, that's pretty freaking good, as long as they're not bankrupt and this continues on. And I mean, even if they were, perhaps by all the gains they made through this, they could still be fine, because that's a lot of freaking shares. But so this is potentially where this becomes a problem, what I talked about before. Now, Boiler Room sales operation. In its rush to sign up more users, they had a specific day, and apparently this was the Wall Street Journal says they call it Spike Day over in their Wall Street Journal. But if we go back, they pushed other boundaries by buying email lists, and they just want to do everything to sign people up. In 2022, Ceres urged managers to increase the price of a software company called PolySign, we talked about it just now, to $3.25 a share to boost the revenue by $600,000. We could turn it into a unicorn via our platform, Ceres said in an email. At the end of 2023, Linkto learned that Ripple, which remains private, was preparing a buyback for stocks at 61 each. Linkto then said to customers who were in the black on their Ripple investments and convinced them to sell 144,000 shares of Ripple back to the company at an average price of $55 a share. And again, they could pocket the difference here, $6 a share, and they apparently made $8 million here in revenue. Ahead of the deal, Linkto hired an external law firm to conduct a review, where apparently that firm came back with an 18-page memo written a few months after Ripple's spike day, warning the company that it was potentially violating multiple federal laws, including anti-fraud provisions of U.S. securities laws, and the external lawyers advised Linkto to immediately cease charging markups for shares. In September of 2024, Linkto abandoned the SPAC merger. A short time later, the SEC informed the company it was starting an investigation. Even apparently the lawyers from Linkto were sending warnings. In an 8-page memo, they worried that its tactics were potentially illegal and outlined roughly a dozen recommended changes, including no longer allowing its customers to self-certify they were accredited and avoiding any possible exposures to civil or even criminal penalties, according to the memo. And that was because, even here, you had to officially be an accredited investor, but perhaps they did not verify this too properly. You could just maybe say, yes, I am. There's also apparently John Deaton, a very well-known lawyer in the community, who apparently invested $500,000 into these private Linkto companies. Quite interesting to read up on. But now here's where things get a little bit more interesting even. So, first of all, the XRP community has turned on one another a little bit. So there are two major players who I have no relationship with, really. I've texted both of them, I think, maybe twice or so throughout my lifetime. I believe to get an interview. Not too sure if they said yes or no anymore. It was when I was not showing my face and I was looking for a potential person to do my face reveal with. It turned out to eventually be John Deaton. It's basically the first time I showed my face on the channel, right? But there's basically two guys, DAI, Digital Asset Investor, and one more person who I forgot, 𝗕𝗓𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗑, Brad Kimes, I believe is the name. Now, those are two of the people that heavily promoted Linkto. Again, I don't think that's bad, honestly, because even now, the opportunity to invest in Ripple stock through a company that allows it, my opinion, pretty good. So I'm not holding them hostage for that. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. So, but 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏, who again, I really, really respect for calling people out and for just explaining things how it is, even though she got a lot of hatred for it. She said it's disgusting, John, that the Linkto management in November had prepared a scripted statement for both Brad Kimes and Digital Asset Investor to read on their videos in November. This put both contracted employees who basically filed a lawsuit against Linkto, right? Those were former employees who said, hey, things are wrong, in an unfair and compromising position. The statement was in response to my sharing of the public document 𝗕𝗓𝗏 versus Linkto. We know now these allegations were true. And this is, again, a while back, there was a lawsuit filed by some employees of Linkto against Linkto, and right, the company Linkto said to these two major promoters, here's a brief, read it out, and if you watch this video, which I just watched, it's him basically saying, it's quite obvious that this is all just a disgruntled employee, you know, this guy is just talking out of his ass, basically, the claims are false. 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏 said a smart person would have paused to reflect, if Brad was so disastrously wrong about something so consequential to the XRP community, what else is he wrong about that he preaches?
Linkto is currently involved in a lawsuit initiated by a disgruntled former employee, not by the SEC, despite some reports suggesting otherwise. The company will be defending itself vigorously against the former employee's false allegations. Linkto provides investment options through special purpose vehicles known as SPVs in its Liquid Shares LLC series, where each unit represents a share in a private company. These investments are documented through an operating agreement and subscription agreement under Linkto Shares LLC, a series LLC designed to safeguard investors' assets and cash even in the event of a bankruptcy. Deloitte, one of the world's largest and top accounting firms, oversees the auditing of Linkto, its subsidiaries, and its SPVs. All assets, cash flows, and revenues associated with these entities have been audited by Deloitte under the PCAOB standard. How about that? So this is where we need to get level set here. And just a personal note for me, you know, this was easy to see from its complaint that this is a disgruntled employee from my personal point of view, and it's being pushed by YouTubers who are failed and just miserable as people. So, you know, look, to me, it's like, let's just give this some time because our assets and everything that we own is safe. Linkto is an incredible company, and they really do have amazing products. And I love that they took the time to come out with the right response. Just you wait and see. Stay tuned.
So the only, I'd say, kind of damning part is the fact that he says it's by YouTubers who are failed, 𝗕𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏, because it seems like he's talking about 𝗲𝗏𝗏, who covered the fact that one of the employees has filed a lawsuit against him. And I personally stand on the opposite side of this. As I cover the news every single day on this channel, I am an advocate for being able to cover anything. If Ripple is being sued by an employee, I want to be able to cover that. And even if it turns out to be a bogus lawsuit, I think it's a good idea to at least cover what this person has to say. If it was frivolous, if it was bogus, in my opinion, I think I'm free to add that to it. But ultimately, I think for the people, it's better to at least have been warned in case it was right, because we, as outsiders, have no freaking idea what's ever going on with these companies. Really, Linkto, Ripple, Google, okay, but Google's public, right? Because if it's smaller companies, especially if they're private, we have no freaking idea what they're doing in the back end. Even employees very often don't know the full details. Take a look at FTX, right? But sometimes, and then FTX was a good example, but you can name a few of those companies that ended up failing. Really, the public has no freaking clue. So these lawsuits should always be taken seriously at first glance. Again, if they were frivolous at the end, we'll know eventually, but it's worth it to cover it. So to then say, oh, but it's a failed YouTube, I think that's kind of sad to say. Honest truth, I think that's sad. Now, the rest of his parts by saying he thinking it's, not a proper lawsuit, I think that's completely fine. Just like I have an opinion, he has an opinion. It's just that part that kind of stung to me because I cover the news as well every single day, and I feel like you can't really be so negative towards someone whose job it is to make or to inform people. So I don't think that's really fair. I don't think that's really nice behavior right there. Now, in hindsight, though, him saying it's obvious to see it's a disgruntled employee, etc., it's kind of funny because ultimately it turns out that some of the statements made, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, according to other reporters, it turned out to be quite true. Now, again, the reason I said at the start of the video, I'm just the middleman here. I'm not sure about all these things because officially, it's not as if Linkto is closed down. It's not as if they are officially bankrupt. All that's being said is there are investigations going on right now. Things are probably not exactly as they seemed. Ripple was concerned about them. Ripple stopped selling them shares or approving sales of shares. There are some things which might have been sketchy based on Ripple's words, and specifically based on the Wall Street Journal's words. A potential bankruptcy could be coming. Again, I'm just reading that out of these reports right here. It's not my personal opinion. It's just what I'm reading on the internet, and I'm portraying that to you. But now comes the triple kicker, because I've already been saying the kicker. By the way, Ari went on a freaking rampage based on all of this. It was interesting. She says she's seen the insides of Linkto for a few months, so she is qualified to have an opinion. But I'm going to put this one forward. A lot of people in the XP community were talking about this right now and got very angry. So Ari said, I never fully understood the Linkto love for the red folder holder camp. Let's hope the bankruptcy proceedings cast needed sunlight on this. I can guess it was about the leader of the committee, who was an active recruiter for Apollo members, SPV investors over 100K. And it's a response to Linkto's earlier post in 2023 that shared extensive analysis reveals the fair market value of XRP ranges from $3.5 to $22,000, so $3,500 to $22,000, according to a comprehensive 2-year research white paper by Valil Capital. The study highlights the potential impact on XRP's adoption and much more. And I've stated in the past 1,000 times as well that even though it's theoretically speaking possible, the probability of a cow, right, headbutting you into oblivion is also non-zero. It doesn't mean it's a high likelihood. Same for this. I thought Valil Capital was a bunch of, okay, let me not say anything too negative in this video, but let's just say I don't really think they're very good at their analysis. I don't think whatever analysis they came up with is something I resonate with, all right? I don't know what type of plants they have in their town, whatever they're at. I don't have no idea where they're at, but I don't know what type of plants they're growing over there. But I think they might have mixed the green one with the brown one, and now there's a little bit, something going on right there. But hey, I don't want to go too deep into that one. But there's also a post that I made earlier as a response to 𝗲𝗏𝗲𝗏, who said, if any organization or influencer in the XP community is propagating the idea of a 5-digit, not 4, but 5-digit XRP price, please assume the best case scenario is they're stupid or new to crypto. And at worst, they may be manipulating you to entice you into some sort of scam or otherwise shady investment scheme. Because if you're waiting for that, if you're hoping for that, if you're looking for that all the time, I think you're a bit, over your head. Let me just say it like this. Are these crazy prices possible? Sure. Is it something you should be waiting for or are likely to happen? No. Why? Well, just like how I would not be sitting here every single day betting on the fall of the United States dollar, it's similar to this. Whereas the United States dollar will probably not live forever. But since it's not in the foreseeable future, not in the next 3 years, for example, not within our grasp, I think it's better to focus on things which are closer by. Even if it's 10, 25 years you're hoping for, if there's no way towards it that you can fathom, it's not worth it to dabble into it, in my opinion, when it comes to these investments. So when we're talking about $10,000 in XRP or more, since I can't see any point where XRP is above, for example, $400, and wow, crazy, it's not worth it to talk about 10,000. I can see a future where XRP is $30. I've explained before why I think $30 is really not that crazy, even for this year. But then if we, again, take a 3x next cycle, that's really, really crazy, but that will be $90 in one of the best case scenarios. Then if we take a 3x, so let's say 10 years from now, another 3x, that will place it at 300. Another 3x might place it at 1,000. Another, so forward. You know how many decades we are in the future? So if we're talking about those things, but there's no real path towards it just quite, why not just skip it, Why, as a company who might benefit from that, say it? I don't know. So here we're talking about $22,000, not $100, which I could have got behind, but $22,000, right? Again, it's not impossible, but you just got to put your horizon very, very far away. If you say, hey, what is it going to be like in 40 years? In 40 years, the world might be so different that I think everything is possible in the investment landscape. It really is. But if we're talking about something in the foreseeable future, 10 years from now, 15 years, I don't know, guys. Anyway, so they said, hey, don't listen to all this. It's bad. And I said $20 in XRP would make my freaking decade. You know how much money I'd make if we go to $20 in XRP? I might just buy every single person that comments something a freaking car like Oprah, because I don't know how many generations will be done because of me. So if you need $10,000 in XRP to do good, go get a job, go work, make some money, man, because $10,000 in XRP, if you need that to be successful, that's not good, brother. But that's my personal opinion, right? It's not it's not really true. You could actually, if you'd want to see a $10,000 XRP because you'd have a lot of money, I get it, right? But then the opposite side is, how would the world look like in that scenario? So it's, anyway, to conclude, if you've ever invested into all this, the problem came at one of the parts of the video I just showed you with your investments, even in the bankruptcy situation, would be quote unquote safe. And now some news is coming out that potentially that is not fully true. Perhaps in a bankruptcy proceeding, you're actually not as safe as you once thought you would be. Just like how in the FTX situation, things are starting to change. I'm not saying this is the next FTX. I'm not saying they are completely done. I'm not saying they were a scam. I'm not saying any of that stuff. No. I'm just stating this is the news that's going around. It's a pretty big deal because I'm going to say that a lot of people watching this video, probably if there's 10,000 people watching this, there's probably 500 at least that have used this platform, I'm going to guess, right? Because it's a small community, right? Most of the people that watch these videos are a lot of the same people. So I'm assuming a lot of people use this to buy Ripple stock. And by that logic as well, could potentially be hurt, or at least will have to figure their stuff out here, but from another angle as well. I wonder what this is going to ruck up within the community, because now we're seeing again how parts of the community are starting to go against one another. In this case here, we've got Ari and 𝗵𝗲𝗲 against DAI and 𝗵𝗏𝗀𝗃. Maybe you don't know these names, completely fine, doesn't matter that much. But it's just to showcase how unity, for the most part, is there when things are good, but very often not there when things are bad. And so, yeah, if somebody says, oh, confirmation from the company, things are good and good and good, you shouldn't always trust that either, because sometimes they're incentivized to say that. And on the opposite side, sometimes we think things are just easy, good, juicy, and it turns out to be a freaking scam or too good to be true opportunity or did that. Again, I just wanted to quickly cover it. One of my conclusions, that is quite difficult to say here, because I will not state that I know exactly what the next steps are going to be. Nor will I state that if you invested into the stock, you are in a troublesome situation because, well, they have freaking 5 million shares or something like that. And since the share price has gone up tremendously, theoretically speaking, they should all be in a good spot. They should be in a good situation. Also, what I don't fully get is why they've come to this bankruptcy situation or why they're even alleging this, because again, many of those stocks have probably gone up. So why are they in that much of an issue? Again, if they had some scammy practices in the back end and will have to pay that back, even then, given a little bit of time, would they not just be able to get over that hurdle? And so from that angle, do investors really have to get hurt in all this, specifically because they use these entities to invest through it? That's what I sometimes wonder. You know, if the CEO enriched himself, for example, through these methods, shouldn't he potentially only himself be in trouble? Because maybe it was really malicious intent from him as a person, and the company would still be okay if he had the means to back up, you know, to give the money back. So to that note, I don't really know what the conclusion would be here. All I know is it's an interesting situation. This affects a ton of XRP and Ripple holders. Theoretically, XRP itself is not affected by this at all, but since the holders, I'm going to guess 100% of the Ripple holders are XRP holders, and it's a very important situation within the community, which you are part of if you're watching this video. I thought it was worthy of a coverage point video. And yeah, if you got some more information, do let me know. Maybe eventually I have to make another update on the situation. Because again, over the next few days, I expect some very, very interesting things to still come out here. For example, this guy said, hey, Uphold, very sneaky of you. Brad denounces having any partnerships with Linkto, but everyone knows Ripple has a partnership and investment in you. So 7 hours ago, you updated your partner list and removed Linkto. Ass. He didn't like that. Ray says here, Linkto, this is, by the way, a previous employee of Linkto, if I'm not mistaken. I'm 95% sure he used to work at Linkto. Linkto investors are mobilizing, accounts frozen, operations halted, and no answers from new management. That was 31st of May. Led by whatever and backed by Steven Nairov, the free Linkto movement is here to fight back. All right. So I guess if I was using Linkto, I might have found out. So this Ray I've known for a few years, I believe. And I guess since he was also one of the employees, he's also now complaining about it through the free Linkto motive. And this is from about a month or so ago, but I'm guessing this might actually be what started it all, but he's not the main guy concerned. But the movement is basically to get Linkto back into a proper shape. I guess maybe the bankruptcy also will be something more along the lines of restructuring, but it's talking about the fact that customers' assets have been frozen back in February and that the operation reserves have been rapidly drained and its revenue streams have been cut off since, well, they can't invest in Ripple anymore, I guess, so there's no more money coming in through that. Left unchecked, we fear the management will execute a premeditated collapse. I'm getting it now. So what some of the older employees are also partially afraid of is the fact that Linkto, since they don't really have any more revenue, I'm supposing this, right, from reading this, have any more big revenue streams, and, well, they've basically been blocked out by Ripple, and they can't really do much on the front of, well, anything really, that they might go for a tactical make the founders or CEO or whatever rich campaign while closing, or I guess just slowly ruining the company, leading it to zero. And these guys are apparently just trying to make sure that does not happen, get Linkto back to a good form by maybe getting rid of the CEO or something like that. 3 hours ago, James says, so it just crossed my mind with the whole Linkto thing. Last year after the employees spilled the beans, I called them. Joe and Doza called me back and told me everything was fine. At that point, I demanded my $60K back, and he told me the only way was for me to sell my shares back to the public. It is now truly a situation. Interesting. John Deaton, very well known as well, he said, for Linkto customers, I'm one of you. As you can see, I'm well aware that people have less than me, some have much more than me also, on the platform, but it represents the entire investment portfolio or retirement. I get how unnerving that is. I've become familiar with bankruptcies through my asbestos law practice. A bankruptcy in this scenario does have positive things. One, Linkto has no debt. Therefore, there's no creditors in line before us. Okay, so we're golden on that one. 2, everything will be public and we get to vote on the outcome. 3, the shares of Ripple, SpaceX, Circle, etc. are all accounted for except for a small percentage of Ripple, which I'll explain today. 4, Linkto record keeping shows what each one of us is owed and the overall value of what we own are there. 5, a bankruptcy will force regulators, for example the SEC, to comply with deadlines, forcing the SEC to not drag this stuff out. And with all of the above, there's a good reason to believe you're getting your money back, and it is very possible to realize the upside of the investments. So that could actually be a good thing as well. All right. I've already seen one post about ending a... what a situation, huh? What a situation. What a situation. What a situation. What a situation. But yeah, as new updates come out, I'll be sure to cover it. But what an interesting situation. Damn. Another video.
The worst thing, in my opinion, maybe I shouldn't say worst thing, but there's an allegation out there that the Wall Street Journal talked about, which is that when Ripple made a legal tender offer. They were going to offer $61 a share to buy back their shares. That Linkto did that, reached out to people. They paid people like $55 and then got 61 from Ripple, and they made the difference. But more troubling is that there was another tender offer, and Linkto sold Ripple shares that were ours. I think about 140,000. So what that means is that John Deaton say is supposed to have 1,000 Ripple shares, interest in the 1,000 shares. Maybe I have 997 now. They did that without permission, and that led to an 18 to 19 million dollar revenue that's sitting in escrow because it can't be touched. It's going to be part of the bankruptcy. That was done without our knowledge and our permission. That's sort of like commingling customer funds. That's some like FTX, SBF shit, man. That's why I'm telling you that if those things are true, and according to new management is true, according to the Wall Street Journal, they've corroborated it, then that's why I say that somebody's getting a perp walked in handcuffs.
Man, interesting situations, man. Damn, I've been covering this. Oh, I should have. By the way, you might be thinking that my story is not all too clear straight from the get-go. It's because there's so much information on this throughout the years, and specifically because it's half of 2024. It's half people I know, it's half people I don't know. It's half of expectation of maybes. It's half of, I don't want to say something too negatively that turns out to just be some grudge or some, So when, for example, we're talking about the bankruptcy, since I could not find the full details, I'm not sure if I should say they are going for a bankruptcy or if it's just, since there's an investigation going on and they've gotten to this point, the bankruptcy is likely, or is it a guarantee? You know what I mean? I'm not 100% sure on those keywords, so I'm just putting it out there in the sense that this is what I think, and this is what I expect, and this is what this person is saying. But this is, for example, from Ari back in November. Lawsuit against Linkto, Saris and Joe, details emerging, insider trading front-running, use of unlicensed brokers. They advertised a lot of users when the real number was 10 to something like that, 1,000, with a lot of them unaccredited. Unconsignable, what is that word?
Unconscionably
high and undisclosed markups, sometimes exceeding 150% above what FINRA recommendations, with algorithms set to increase the price each time a unit was purchased. Long sentence. And please expedite frenzied sales to avoid the auto increase ahead of Linkto customers. Linkto did not disclose they made the market in securities they offered, creating FOMO marketing techniques, falsely claiming shares were about to sell out. Their marketing techniques certainly crossed the line. They circumvented the SEC Rule 506B. Investors were not buying shares even though this was in their marketing. No compliance vetting in certain countries. An internal test was created. Only 50% passed. Yet this test does not meet FINRA standards, and more. Yeah. That was back in November. This is now July, and I guess things have not really gotten better. But hey, most people at that point did not know. 150,000 people saw it. And then a lot of people were skeptical, saying, well. And that's, again, what they were referring now about when it comes to the claims of, oh, it's all fine, right, with those YouTubers. And then now I guess things have turned around where, yeah, things are just worse. But yeah, I don't want to make this video too long. It's already like 40 minutes. Damn, it's the longest video I've made in many weeks, or many months even. If you watched all the way through this, damn, you've got my respect, all right? Make sure you comment green or something with green, or the markets, or markets green down below, so I know you watched all the way through. And if you did, I'll be looking back on this for the next day or so, maybe a few days. I'll see whoever's commenting, and I'll make sure to give you a heart, because everybody, if you're watching this far away, you fart through. That's it. That's the end of the video.